Hey everyone, it's me. As if you didn't know. Today is a busy day for me. It began with the Mark Meckler and Rick Santorum on the radio this morning. I tried to get in on the radio and the lines were packed. I got a chance to listen to most of the interview. I was on last week with Kevin Miller, as many of you might know, talking about the other side of the Article 5 issue, the counter view of the Convention of States, if you will. I know that people now are starting to pay attention. I think the key is if you create enough of a stir, I think people will start paying attention. But as for one guy just trying to stand out there and promote an issue that most people don't seem to really care about, it's really difficult. So I wanted to give you some post thoughts on the Article 5, the conversation that Mark Meckler and Rick Santorum had. But I think before I wanted to do that, I wanted to really ask each one of you to be able to search your souls and ask yourself one thing. One, do you put idols before you? In other words, are you so blurred out with idol worship that Trump is king no matter what? If Trump isn't king, are you looking for another king? Are you looking for Santorum or DeSantis to take his place or what have you? Because if you are, you might as well not even listen to the rest of this. The other thing is if you're really concerned about special interest groups trying to continue to destroy your freedom like they clearly are, and you somehow don't think that these people that are spokespeople for the COS are paid extremely well, at least in my experience I've seen, which could arguably be somebody from out of state in support of special interest, I would encourage you to reconsider that. I'd like you to look at the issue for what it is. I'd like you to be able to say, I might have been wrong before. I'm not really sure what I know, and be completely open and honest about what it is that we try to know or what we need to know. The one thing to remember also is that every decision that we make is going to have a consequence. Every decision our kids make, right? It has a consequence. Every decision that we make has a consequence. Some of them are horrific consequences. Do you want to be able to go down this road not knowing what you should know because you're so focused on the idol worship of a particular individual that you believe has been exceptional in his career? And he may have been. I'm not saying he isn't. I'm just saying that they're human and everybody can always be wrong on an issue, especially if we can point out inconsistencies in their argument. When you have logical debates, one of the things that you do, aside from determining the terms of the debate, is to be able to spot out people's inconsistencies and to reduce, I think it's called reduce them to absurdity, and there's a Latin term for that. And I think that's important. The average citizen, I think, is just so emotionally drawn into this issue that, oh my God, we've got to do something. We can't just do nothing, and they're willing to be able to just do whatever it takes just because, if it doesn't work, then we're screwed anyway. Well, who's to say that? And that's kind of a defeatist attitude. And if that's an attitude you're going to be taking, then you are really not ready for the fight. You're not ready to be able to intellectualize your argument and separate the emotion from the intellectual side and look at things for what they really are. And this is something that we really need to have a chat about. So I gave my spiel for an hour on the radio, and I'm very happy that Kevin Miller allowed me to do that. He openly came out and said that he was in support of the Convention of States, which I'm not really surprised about. Mark Meckler's done a great job at communicating with him, and I think Kevin now is going to MC the event tonight at 7 o'clock. But I had to listen to it, and I was honestly a little bit disturbed that the questions that people were asking were rather softball. And if you don't mind me sounding like I'm disrespectful when I'm not trying to do that, if this is our Constitution and we're all God-loving freedom patriots and we're all ready to die for our country and be covered in brass and, you can take it from my cold dead hands and all that crap, then why are we not able to ask tough questions about the Article 5 convention that they're currently meeting for lunch with your legislators right now, with your House and Senate members, because I was there. Now, I don't want you to go and rip into the COS people, and I know sometimes I've had bad experiences with them too, but they want what's best for this country. I believe they do. The problem is, I don't know if they know what we know. And so the dialogue needs to be had. But if people like myself that oppose the convention are being shut down every time we try to be able to open up that dialogue, I can't do this on my own. You have to pull up your big boy panties and your big girl panties, and you have to say, you know what? I need to know more about this issue. As a matter of fact, I need to know more about this issue. The other thing I found out is some of these people are paid very, very well to speak. They're paid very well to speak. I'm not paid very well. Period. And to speak, not. But I've been active in Idaho for 20 years, working on making sure that my Idahoans are as properly informed about an issue as possible. And sometimes my emotions get in the way, and I'm guilty of that just like anybody else is. But you know what? Our country is hanging in a balance. Do you really want to just be able to haphazardly listen to some talking points that somebody else has said and believe that they're true? I'd love to believe that they're true too. But what if they're lying to you? Or maybe what if they don't know they're lying? Or what if they know? I don't know. You got to remember anyway. So some of these talking points are really concerning. The first question I'd want to remind you about is, back in the day when they were formulating the Constitution, I think it was, anyway, there were 84 essays about why the Constitution would be supported. And so the Federalists wrote the articles, and then the Anti-Federalists chimed in, and there was surely some dialogue about whether we should actually do this or whether we shouldn't do it or what have you, right? The problem was that dialogue was being had, and today it isn't. And somebody could say, well, that's just because it's the mainstream media. Well, hold on a minute. Why is that true? Well, because COS is going to have you believe that this is only something that conservatives support. It's not. I did a video on YouTube and last week or so down on Facebook, you can scroll down to it, that I've shown you the multitude of organizations that support this. It was argued to me by somebody that I know in Montana that said Mark Meckler and Rick Santorum allegedly said that anybody that doesn't support the Convention of States is a communist. Unbelievable. The John Birch Society, for example, is known for 63 years to be an anti-communist organization, and there's a 71-page document called the California Report done by Congress back in that time to be able to prove that we were an anti-communist organization, and nobody can prove otherwise. So all of these attacks are like saying, oh, you're racist, and you're a bigot, and you're a homophobe, and you're whatever. We need to have the dialogue. So then Santorum goes on, he says, we really need to stop the lies. I totally agree. We need to stop the lies. He says, we need to reinstitute responsibility. We totally agree. He says, there are consequences of our actions. I totally agree. He might not be talking about whether we support a con or not, or maybe he is. So the question is why does he support a COS? And he said he's concerned about his future. He's concerned and he's got fear about losing his country. And that federalism is being completely undermined. And he says, well, the people that oppose the Constitution say that the Constitution's not the problem, but it is the problem because the Constitution's already been touched, he said. That's a lie. The Constitution is the only thing that we have on paper that allows us the things to be able to do what we do, like freedom of speech and the Second Amendment and all of that. Why do you think they're working so hard to undermine all of those things? It still maintains its integrity on paper, and as long as that integrity still remains on paper, then you and I still have the power, and we still have the duty to be able to do what we're supposed to be doing. But you know what we want to do instead? Oh, we'll just nuke the Constitution because it's the problem because it's already been touched. Do you know why it's been touched? Because so many people are not paying attention to what's going on in Congress. Because, oh, well, Congress is just, it's so far gone, I don't want to pay attention. What a defeatist freaking comment. Seriously? You're going to say, oh, I'm not going to do, what if your kids just completely became unruly? Are you going to ignore them too? Your neighbors? No. Why would you do that with your freedom and the freedom for future generations? Is that inconsistency in your argument? Of course it is. The Constitution hasn't been touched. Well, I don't even want to go down into the rabbit hole about the annotated Constitution and all of that kind of stuff. And then they talked about the fact that since the 16th and 17th Amendment, the Constitution exploded. No, it didn't. Well, I would argue that some of those amendments did. But what you have to know is that the 16th and 17th Amendment are the very essence of what the Convention of States says, that there's a safeguard with 3/4 of the ratification process that was actually changed from the Articles of Confederation, by the way. So they're actually making my argument. The 16th and 17th Amendments are horrible, but they were passed and they were ratified because of the fact that people were limited to believing that these bad amendments couldn't be passed, and they were. What it also instituted was the conspiratorial element called the Federal Reserve, which isn't federal and it isn't a reserve. They are the ones that are creating and fabricating these bust boom cycles, and now they're controlling economies around the world through the World Bank and the IMF and the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Economic Forum, and the UN. See what I'm saying? COS isn't talking about that. So they say the Constitution has changed. I would almost be willing to say, I'll bet you $5,000 the Constitution hadn't been changed if I had the money. But look at it. Has it been changed? No. The integrity of the Constitution is still the same. Still has 27 amendments. Still has still has the Bill of Rights. Still has the original articles. It hasn't been changed. The mindset of the people has been changed. To believe that somehow there's either nothing you can do, or somehow you need to trust an attorney or some out-of-state interest that's being paid whatever to be able to do that. And we can't listen to Tom Munns because even though he doesn't get really paid very well and doesn't get paid to do what he's doing, somehow he can't be right because he's not really as decorated as everybody else is. So I'm a man on an island. And if you oppose it, you're a man on an island too. So I would refute the idea that the Constitution's been touched. It's the fact that you and me have not done our duty in holding government accountable. That's really what it's up to. Then they say, oh, well, the courts and, the Congress and all of that stuff. Congress opened up the New Deal and somehow accepted that as law with the administrative state back in FDR's time. Yeah, but did they change the Constitution? No, they didn't. Which means that the whole FDR scenario with the New Deal was extra constitutional, which means it's not even part of the Constitution, for crying out loud. So the Constitution, once again, has not been touched. And I think that you would agree with me, which means that I'm right and what they're saying is wrong, and I'm the one that's not being paid, and they're being paid big money. And they're right now visiting with your legislators. More notes. I don't care how long this takes. The U.S. SCOTUS amended the Constitution. Amendments were ignored. Did the Supreme Court amend our Constitution? No. Why would they say that it amended the Constitution? They say that SCOTUS has gone wild. SCOTUS has gone wild, for sure. But they didn't amend the Constitution. They only, what he's talking about, I believe, is the annotated version that now is about between 3,000 and 5,000 pages. You can download a PDF of that if you want. Congress comes out with it every couple of years. So what that begs the question is do you think it's this Constitution that they're paying attention to, or this Constitution they're paying attention to? Because then again, the Constitution itself has still not been changed. I would challenge you to go to D.C. and look at the original document yourself. Has it been changed? No. So why are they telling you it's been changed? It's a lie. It's maintained its integrity on paper. The only way that the citizens have the duty to be able to restore government to the proper role is for you to get off your butt. is for you to start learning about these issues and to be able to stand up in absolute defiance and call these people out with hardball questions. Now, I have all the respect for Mark Meckler in the world. I mean, he came out and he said that, I'm honorable and that my family's honorable. And I was very, very happy that he said that. But I'm going to share something with you since it's just you and I. I was invited to the legislative luncheon today. I was involved to the legislative luncheon today on the behest of one of our senators that couldn't go. And they said it happens all the time. So you should just feel free to go. So I went. And I met all of the COS people, the regional directors and local captains and all that. All good people. They're like, oh, Tom Muntz, come on in. Yeah, this is great. Then Mark shows up. And Mark, you could tell he was angry. He said, Tom, you were outside of your integrity when you actually came here. And, I think I was more upset by the fact that he said that I was not in my integrity than not being allowed into lunch. And although I was allowed by the senator to attend, he says, this is my meeting, which helps me think, okay, well, if this is his meeting, did he fund it? Or did the supporters fund it? And if the supporters funded it and they allowed me to come, then why shouldn't I be there? I wasn't there to disrupt the thing. I wasn't even going to say a dang thing. I just wanted to learn more. And so we have that too. So I left, and out of respect for him and try to maintain my integrity according to what that is. And I wanted to make sure that he knew that I had no malice or whatever intent or whatever. But I still wanted to be there because I wanted to understand a little bit more about what they're saying to our legislators. Don't we have the right to know? They're having a public meeting with they're having a private meeting with the legislators. And I would actually argue that that's illegal. Because all they would need to do is to be able to sway a majority of people in a private forum without you knowing. They could opt to create a bill and pass a bill next week, and you'd have no idea. Does that sound like something I'm trying to do to you? No. I'm trying to let you know about it. If you want to make the decision and you want to support the convention and you believe that the only way to rein in an out-of-control government is to be able to nuke our Constitution, yeah, I'm going to have to live with your consequence. But there isn't really anything lawful I can do to change your mind other than have that dialogue. And that's what I really want so desperately, They don't cover the elements of conspiracy. They said no one in D.C. will stop doing what they're doing. Well, yeah, it's because the state citizens have been derelict in their duty and they're not even calling their congressmen and holding them accountable. Because they say, oh, well, it's not going to matter anyway because they're not going to listen. It's like, you can enjoy all your defeatist attitude, but keep that stuff to yourself. Because if you've already decided to nuke our Constitution, then why don't you just move to Venezuela? I mean, why don't we have that dialogue? They said the train is off the track. It's, the founders gave us Article 5 because in case of an emergency. What, like a parachute? Like somehow if the government becomes abusive to these ends, that somehow we can pull that emergency trigger and somehow we can restore liberty? So let me get this straight. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to open this thing up to amendments. And oh yeah, they'll be able to limit it too, but I'll get to that, right? So we're going to be able to limit the Constitution and all of these different things. And we're going to get them to adhere to these words magically. My phone's dying. They're going to magically adhere to these words, right? Oh yeah, well they're not adhering to the Constitution now, but boy, I tell you what, we put some amendments in there, and you know what's going to happen. You know what Mark Meckler even said on the radio when somebody asks, "What are you going to do when these people don't listen to the limitations in the office?" They said, "We're going to have litigation." It's like, then why not have litigation now? The whole point of having the convention, you guys, is because it's a standalone autonomous body. It's something that is outlined in the Declaration of Independence, right? Where the people, when they've dealt with all of the abuses to these ends, it's their duty to abolish or change their form of government, consistent with Federalist 40, I believe. So that's our sovereign right to do that. That convention is a sovereign body, and Robert Nadelson himself even stated that. The other thing to consider is the Convention of States is not even real. The Convention of States is nowhere in Article 5. And they say, oh, yeah, we've had hundreds of conventions of states. Well, I would argue the legality of that, number one, considering I think there's something saying that we shouldn't be entering into compact with other states and, private companies anyway, especially with what we're dealing with the emergence of public-private partnerships, which is globalism. So they said, oh, yeah, we can just create a resolution and it'll be limited. Well, what's their guarantee that it can be limited? Well, Mark Meckler was on Red Eye Radio in 2017, and I have a copy of it, and he basically openly admitted that the Convention of States wouldn't work, something like that, right? I mean, that's what he said. So, and you can't limit a constitution, and there's actually precedence of that fact. The fact is that none of these conventions that they had before were Article 5 conventions. None of them. And now they're saying, oh, yeah, we've had conventions of states. Convention of states isn't even on Article 5. So if they want to have their own conventions and somebody thinks they're legal, that's fine. But if they're using these conventions of states as Article 5, whether it's an Article 5 convention or not, they're still using Article 5, and they're bound to the rules of Article 5. Simple, right? So there's no way to limit that. When they tried to limit it the first time, they were supposed to amend the Articles of Confederation. And what happened? They replaced the entire document, and they changed the ratification from unanimous to 3/4. Can they make it maybe ratification 10% now? 5%? Or maybe we can just say if Mark Meckler approves that somehow all of a sudden it's going to be legal. They said, oh yeah, and the other thing to consider too is they said, well, there's 3/4 of the states, so you need 38 states to get on board. That's an absolute safety net, is it? Because right now, before Congress, and I have the bill number at home, they're working on amalgamating all of these conventions. They said, oh, well, you have to have 34 states that have, the same convention, just for term limits or for balanced budget or for whatever, right? But Congress, they're saying, doesn't want to have the convention, but Congress is actually working towards having a convention right now. They're working on bringing them all together, all the term limits, all the balanced budget, all that. They said it's not an Article 5 convention. They said they had a simulation, which was the mock convention they had a couple of years ago. Well, they ended up handpicking the delegates. Most of them were Republicans. Is it going to be equal representation for the Democrats too? Or equal representation for the states? So these are all really good questions. And they say that with these limitations, they can say that the courts can't go beyond certain limitations. How are they going to do that? That's reducing the sovereign power that the individuals have as individuals, and the individual sovereign power that the states have to be able to open up an autonomous convention to be able to right wrongful government. Can you imagine having delegates from 50 states going in there and saying, no, Tom, you can't do that. No, Jerry, you can't do that. You can do that over there, Alice. And Joe, you can do that. And you can't do that over there. And you can do this, Cindy, but you can't do that. Can you even imagine? And they think somehow the result of this convention is going to be worthwhile. You have to forget the idea that they're saying that the courts and the legislature and probably the executive branch all have the ability to limit government. They don't. It would completely destroy the whole point of having a convention. And the other thing to consider is if you want term limits, then why don't you appeal for term limits without a convention? Can do that. That's how 27 amendments were done. Oh, well, Congress isn't going to do it. Well, I beg to differ, and who's to say that they're not? Because they're actually doing that. They're going to limit the jurisdiction. So they told me they want to do 3 limitations, and this gets pretty interesting. Actually, there's a lot more. 3 limitations: term limits, limit taxation and spending, and they want to limit the jurisdiction of the federal government. But they're going to need to open up a convention to propose amendments that somehow they can control to be able to do that. So what amendment would limit the jurisdiction of the federal government? How many would you need? Well, I thought we can limit this to 1 issue. They say you can limit it to 1 issue. Then they said, oh, we can limit it to 3. And then we're going to limit it to here and limit there. I've already shown you that that's not possible. Then they said they wanted to nationalize elections, and then they said something about locally run. So I'd have to go back and listen to what that was, which was a little bit weird. But they reassured the people on the radio it's just not going to happen. A runaway convention is just not going to happen. And that they said, I just don't understand why people are concerned about this. Basically saying, we got this. Just trust Mark Meckler and Rick Santorum and Tom Coburn, and which has made some pretty interesting topics when they ended up supporting the No Child Left Behind Act and all of that kind of garbage. And then we can go down that rabbit hole. But he said something very intricate and very important for you guys. He said, the talking points have to be easy to explain or you lose. There he said it. Look what the left does. Racist, bigot, homophobe. How are you going to come back from that? White supremacist? What? So the thing that's left for us is to be able to say, yeah, we believe that the Article 5 is in there. We believe it's constitutional. No, you don't. It's like, yes, we do. We acknowledge that. But we acknowledge, that there's a certain purpose for Article 5. And was it really to rein in an out-of-control government? And, of course, the answer is no. I've got some historical evidence in this bag for you if you're interested in knowing what this is. And then he says something else. He says, Mark Meckler was the one that says this. He said, I would propose these things. So now I've probably gone on for too long, but they basically said that they need to actually put the unconstitutional acts in the Constitution or state that the unconstitutional acts are clearly unconstitutional. Can you imagine how big that would be? So how much tax money are we going to put in there? And what worth is it for us to be able to itemize all of the abuses against the government just to be able to prove that they're not unconstitutional? And doesn't that actually empower the government rather than empower the people? Because every unconstitutional thing that government does would have to be limited. That's insanity. That's insanity. And so they said, well, we live in a world where people believe that SCOTUS is the supreme law. What else could be more clear? Because people believe that the Supreme Court is the supreme law and that America is a democracy. He openly said it in that statement. There's nothing wrong with the Constitution. It's people's understanding of it. The Supreme Court can't make law now any more than they did because the states are spineless to try to be able to stop SCOTUS from doing it. Do you know why? Because it's attached to money. And if the federal government withhold funds when states are on the hook for 30% or more of their annual budget, which is horrible for us and we seem to be okay with it, which is stupid, we totally allow this to happen. The problem isn't our Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. The problem is us. The problem's us. And Rick Santorum said the only thing that, COS is the only one. The reason why I jumped on was that COS is the only action plan that's laid out in the Constitution about what the solution is. So I guess I'm going to mean that to say that the Convention of States should have private meetings with our legislators. They should not allow me in there. They should be able to use fear tactics to tell them that we can't just do anything and that the federal government's out of control and that we need to use Article 5 to rein in an out of control government when Article 5 wasn't even created for that purpose. He also said that the states can't use the 10th Amendment. Well, if the states can't use the 10th Amendment and that's in our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, then what words that they put in there are going to give the power back to us? Because the 10th Amendment, I assure you, is still in the Bill of Rights. It hasn't been changed. People's understanding of that has been changed. They said it's the only way to fix our problem. I would totally disagree. Reining in an out-of-control government needs to be done. Article 5 is not the mechanism. So you might say, well, what is it that we can do? Well, we can nullify all unconstitutional laws. We can empower. We need to empower our legislators. We need to empower our senators. We need to empower our representatives. We need to reach out to our congressmen and senators at the congressional level. We need to hold them accountable and act like we really love our country, and they need to hear from us about all of these different abuses. Once they know that we have their back, they are going to strengthen their backbone. It always happens. I can tell you that happens. They said that the legislators can put controls on the conventions and on the legislature to limit these amendments, but they really can't. The only thing that the legislature can do is apply for to submit an application for an Article 5 convention to Congress. Then Congress proposes amendments, and then it goes back to the states for ratification. That's how it works. The states do have the power. He says the states have the, they're the top whatever he said, top whatever. Basically the power is all in the hands of the states. Well, if the power is in the hands of the states on one hand, and he's saying that that the 10th Amendment has been neutered on the other hand, do the states really have that power? Well, yeah, they do. They have the power. It's just that they need to be empowered to do it. There isn't any amendment that they need to become empowered. They just need to take that power upon themselves. It's like you have the ability as a parent to be responsible, personally responsible for you and your children, or you can choose not to. Both have consequences, but we choose the option to be personally responsible and to be able to make sure that we can pray or obtain the wisdom that we need to make the best decisions for our children. We see what's happening with people that don't really care about their kids, that say they care about their kids, that say it's all about the kids, and they're enslaving their entire future. So the question really is inherent among us about what you want to do with the situation that we have right here. Yeah, we're plagued by globalism. We're plagued by conspiratorial elements that COS won't even acknowledge. But it's time for us to act like adults. Look at things for the way they are. Have the dialogue. Don't get into an argument with somebody. If somebody's going to adamantly disagree with you, there's nothing you can do. You tried. But if you come in with a more passive attitude, which is something I try to do all the time, people are way more willing to listen. I mean, I walked into a Convention of States group that knows that I work for the John Birch Society. They know that I'm against the Convention of States, and they welcomed me in that arena to sit down and break bread with them. Out of this day and all of the things that are coming, I couldn't have asked for anything better. Other than, I wish Mark Meckler would have known that I'd like to consider that I was in my integrity in the way that I applied this, and I really took offense to the fact that he said that I wasn't. I guess we'll see what happens tonight. So tonight there's an event. I think it's 601 Grove at 7 p.m. I hear that Mark Meckler and Santorum are going to be speaking at the Ada County Central Committee tonight. I'm hoping if one of you are Republicans in Ada County that you will to hear my plea. I want somebody there to stand up, and I want you to say, at some point when proper, okay, I don't want you to upset the apple cart, is to appeal to the Ada County whoever and say, before Ada County decides they're going to take a position on this issue, we decided that we've listened to Mark Meckler and Rick Santorum speak, but we're going to allow Tom Munns to do it too. And if they decide to be able to go for it, then, well, just let them do it. I'll let them know that they're going to end up suffering consequences. But I think ultimately at some point we have to let people make decisions. And sadly, some of these people are going to make these decisions for us. And they could end up having horrible consequences for us. So sorry this video is a little long. It was very, very important. I hope I see you guys at the center tonight. If you see me down there, come and find me. I'll probably be dressed just like this, so I should be easy to find. God bless you guys for listening. I hope you share the video. I hope you share the video with other people. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.